the Instructor podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor podcast. This is a show that helps you become an even more awesome driving instructor and run a better driving school. As always, I am your splendid host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, even more delighted that you have chosen to listen because we are diving into the vault again today. We're going back 2 years and bringing you a remastered episode from 2024. Now, in 2024, I released my road safety season, and it was roughly this time, 2 years ago, that it wrapped up. And I'd spoken to some brilliant people like Sharon Huddleston, Rebecca Morris, and James Luckhurst. But we wrapped up the season with a very special episode with Stewart Lochrie of Bright Coaching and the NJC. And that's what I'm re-releasing today. I think it's an episode that kind of snuck under the radar a little bit and still does. But listening back to it, it's a really important episode. It really digs into road safety and the role instructors play, and specifically what we can do with both learners, parents, and even the road safety sector itself. Now, if you enjoy this road safety content, you'll find even more of it at the Instructor Performance and Psychology membership. We've got an entire collection over there devoted right to this. You can even sign up for a 1 week's free trial. Just head over to patreon.com/instructor or use the link in the show notes. But for now, let's get stuck into the show. So we're now joined by Bright Coaching's Stewart Lochrie, the Scottish Han Solo. How are we doing, Stewart?
I'm great, Terry, thanks. How are you today?
No, all the better for seeing your smiley face, and I'm delighted to have you on board because I think pretty early into recording this road safety season, I realised that I wanted to do an extra episode on the end to talk about some of the things we covered, because it's all been road safety professionals, it's all been academics, it's been people within the road safety specific arena rather than the driving instructor specific arena. So I think that we needed to get that driving instructor view on at the end. And you seem the ideal person because road safety is a lot of what you deal with. I know you've got some strong opinions around it, and some of them don't always align with mine. I think we disagree more than, maybe not more than we agree, but more than I anticipate sometimes. So delighted to get you on to talk about this. So I'm going to throw you the nice open question to begin with, which is your overall thoughts on the kind of the content this season, the messages we've been trying to get across.
Yeah, good question. I think what you have created here in terms of choosing road safety as a theme and pushing it to you're putting it out there for your audience has been really brave. So I think you deserve great credit for that. Some of your content is a tough listen for driving instructors, for many driving instructors, I think. Some more than others, as we'll go on to talk about. And I think you've taken a risk in some of the guests that you've got on. But I think that this series should stand the test of time. It will definitely stand the test of time. That's the way I'm thinking about it. This is a series that I would direct PDIs to. And I think we'll talk about that as we go through in terms of the knowledge that is contained within these episodes. So yeah, well done to you on that. I've enjoyed listening to it. I went through it again to get some bullet points because I knew that we were going to do this episode today. So yeah, I think I said to you just before we came on air, you know me by now, I could give you an hour episode on every episode, but I'm not going to do that to your listeners.
Well, I did ask you how long I had you before you came on. You said as long as you want. So this could be a while, but we'll see. I am interested though, because I think I know what you mean, but the listeners may not. So when you say that I've taken a risk with this season and with some of the guests, what do you mean by that?
So you have been phenomenally successful in putting content together and bringing guests together from all walks of life, people out with our industry, and generally creating that message or recreating that message of the value of CPD and self-development. That's what first got me interested in the work that you were doing when we first met. Was it just last year that we met? Yeah, it was towards the start of last year. And you've done that, I think, by mixing things up and keeping it fresh. Bringing in people like Sophie Lydon, fresh come into my mind there, because we talk about Sophie Lydon. Coaching coaches from outside the industry, expert sessions, which, as we know, so things like standoff checks and all this kind of thing. That's the stuff that gets driving instructors' attention. And you've managed to create all that, whether it's conscious or unconscious. It's just been a really successful model. And so for you to focus on something like road safety, which forces ADIs to almost look at themselves in the mirror a little bit, is what I mean by it being brave. Some of it can be uncomfortable. It just forces us to up our game, and it gives us really specific, in your face reasons that are otherwise easy for us to kind of turn the other way on sometimes. Does that make sense?
Complete sense. It's completely what I was thinking. And I will touch on that a little bit. I don't want to dwell on sort of me too much, because I will happily. It's probably not ideal. But it is that the point you just made there about making ADIs looking on themselves. You know, there was one episode in particular that I titled what responsibility should take ADIs take post-test for the students. And that created some interesting feedback with, you know, a variety of different answers through comments on social media, comments on my premium, and messages that we're getting. That, let's say there were a few tasty ones there. Let's put it that way. But it is that forcing us, because, you know, I'm a driving instructor, forcing us to look at ourselves. And that was conscious. And it was because when I look at the road safety aspect, I cannot get away from this idea of it, that knife crime in London is a big thing at the minute. And I actually spoke about this when I came up to talk to you up in Scotland and your guys. Knife crime in Scotland is a big thing. Sorry, knife crime in London is a big thing. But
no, you're right the first time.
Well, it's got better though in Scotland, hasn't it? Because they've worked on the principles of how can we help people rather than just discipline. But now I'm going off on a political tangent. Let's roll back in. This is why I don't talk about myself. Yes. So knife crime in London is a big thing. But it's really easy for me to support that, because to support that, I just say, don't stab people. And I'm not stabbing anyone right now. Therefore, I'm doing what I say. But to talk about road safety, people actually have to look at the way they drive and the way they behave. And that's a challenge, because you can probably 90% of road users would need to change the way they drive if they wanted to, you know, reduce the casualties on road. And I think that's what I wanted to bring to ADIs, that we need to look at ourselves as well when we're looking at this subject. And it was a risk. And the numbers haven't been, how did I phrase it? They have been better than I expected, but not as good as I hoped. But the engagement with this season has been like far outweighing anything I've done before. So yeah, I think it was a risk that paid off. And I thank you for the words, by the way. And I was really happy with the way this has gone. But let's dig into some of the messages and potentially some of the episodes. What were some of your key takeaways, some of the things that maybe that stuck with you from the episodes?
So I want to start with Sharon Huddleston. I think she has been, she is the most important guest that you've had on. If you're going to host a podcast series all around road safety, you send me a message to say that you were doing it before you did it, and just my immediate response was, that's such a brave thing to do. I've used that word brave before, but it was a brave thing to do. And it was absolutely the correct thing to do, because to give someone like Sharon a really kind of central role in your series, again, forcing ADIs, not forcing, but giving ADIs the opportunity to hear firsthand that experience of a bereaved family member is just so important. It was a really tough listen. I couldn't listen to it all the way through, Terry. I'm going to be honest. Much like the lady who spoke at the Intelligent Instructor event, it was just really powerful. But I think one of the main takeaways I had from that episode was around knowledge. The knowledge that the general public has about the dangers of road safety. And again, a couple of your guests mentioned it in that series. So Sharon was talking about becoming familiar with the stats that many of us are aware of. You know, if you're in your car, if you pass your test and you're in your car with your peers, you're 4 times more likely to be involved in a crash. All these ones that a lot of us can kind of rhyme off now. And Sharon spoke about if she had been aware of these stats and these facts, that she would have acted differently. Now, Sharon sounds like a lovely person. I've got nothing but the utmost respect for her, but I couldn't help but take from what she was saying that we bear responsibility for that side of it. I felt that she would have been perfectly within her rights to say on your podcast, driving instructors know these stats. Why did you not tell me as a parent about these stats? And I'm listening, and I listened to it again to kind of make sure that I was picking it up correctly. Now, she wasn't implying anything. She wasn't putting any blame on anyone at all. But if she had, could anyone blame her? Could anyone blame her for the fact that driving instructors are fully aware of all this stuff? No, I mean, that's a stretch. That's a stretch. A significant proportion of driving instructors know about the challenges with road safety. A significant proportion of ADIs know about all the data and know about all the stats. But we are not proactive in passing this information on to others because we don't think it's our job to do so. It's somebody else's job.
You kind of joked earlier on about, we could spend an hour on each episode. I think we might, because there's a lot you've said there that I want to touch back on. And I think it's only right that first that, I take a moment to thank all the guests, but in particular Sharon for coming on because she was amazing. And a little story or quick story. Sharon is the only person I can remember, I'll put that caveat on, the only person I can remember that before recording, I have told them that I'm nervous because I felt like I don't want to balls this one up. And yeah, it was that thing. If we knew, we wouldn't have done this. And I do want to touch on one thing here, actually, before I move on a little bit. It's the difference between responsibility and fault. I think I talk a lot about we need to take responsibility for stuff. That doesn't mean it's our fault. It means that we can do things differently. When I have a student, let's use the example of fail a test. I always look at what I could have done differently. And I'm not the perfect driving instructor. Every single lesson I do is not 10 out of 10. So therefore, there's always something I could do differently. That doesn't mean it's my fault, but it means I can take responsibility and look what I do differently. And yeah, from this season, as you alluded to, I'm putting more of these stats across. I've got a whole new thing coming up in June through my driving school social media where I'm putting it out on there, because it's not just about saying to the students, it's stuff that we can do publicly. But I did want to kind of mention this. Now, some of my premium members may have heard me say this already, but I was at the Road Peace final mile walk this weekend, and what I didn't know with Les Hopkinson, I'll give Les a shout. What I didn't know was going to happen was there was going to be some speakers there, which were parents of children who died in collisions. That was tough to sit through, and there's a specific point I'm getting to here, which is they all said that if we'd known this, we would have acted differently. And that was haunting to hear. I think there was 5 speakers, and I think all 5 of them said, if we'd known this, there's a chance our child would be alive today. As a driving instructor, if for me to be there, or for an instructor listening to that now, or listening to the episode with Sharon Huddleston, if that doesn't make you want to change or adapt or add something to your lessons, I don't know what will.
Yeah, you're bang on, and I think we've had exactly the same reaction there. There was I just glanced down at my notes there that I wrote when I was listening to it, and I've written that there's something about hearing a bereaved parent recite these stats back that cuts close to the bone. That's what I wrote. So Elizabeth Box can come on and recite these stats to us, and that's one thing. But when Sharon Huddleston comes on and recites these stats back to us, that is a very different. It is difficult. It's a very different experience for me, and it sounds like you've had the same thing. And it's that, it just gives another bit of impetus to kind of do something. Yeah, as you said earlier, kind of do something about that.
And that for me ties in a bit to the first episode I recorded on this series, which was Rebecca Morris from Road Peace. And I spoke about it on there, about looking at the memorial page on the Road Peace website. that had a similar effect to me when I saw that. I said it on the podcast. It's like this brought it home. I'd not seen the faces of, you know, all a significant number of people that have died on roads before. You might hear about it in like, a local newspaper because it won't make national news because, you know, road deaths aren't as important as other deaths according to the government. So we might see something on a local newspaper or, you know, potentially even local radio at a push. But to go onto the road police website and see all the pictures up there are these smiley, happy people who went for a drive or were walking down the street, you know, or whatever it is, and didn't need to die, but did. That had that similar effect. But actually speaking to someone in person was, yeah, that was an interesting one. But let's move away slightly from the personal side of it though as well, because it is important, and I appreciate the words you said there as well. And there's a bit of me that agrees it is the most important, or potentially the most important episode I've done. But I also, I hope I phrase this one right, I also think we have to not allow ourselves to become too tied into the emotion.
Yeah. Listen, just before you move on from that, one of the things we're interested in, one of the things that comes out through the episodes, and you know, the other stuff that you put out as well through the Instructor podcast, is the importance of behaviour change to young drivers. What we're engaged in, what you're engaged in, and what I do with bike coaching, and what other trainers do with stuff around the GD matrix, anything above kind of part 3, we're involved in behaviour change of driving instructors, whether we like it or not. That's a lot of what we're trying to do. And as Ian Edwards will tell you, and as Liz Box will tell you, you need to have different messages for different people because different messages resonate. When I was talking about Sharon Huddleston, reciting those figures back, that got me. Now, when you brought up Rebecca Morris, which is what put this into my head, on the Rebecca Morris episode, that's a very different kind of listen. So people like Rebecca Morris and, is it Lucy from Break? Lucy
Straker, yeah.
Lucy Straker from Break. When you listen to Rebecca Morris and Lucy Straker, you get a very similar vibe from listening to these people, and it's almost like a very matter of fact. There's like a simmering anger, or not resentment's the wrong word. There's a really belief. There's a belief coming through there, and a disbelief at the same time about why this isn't talked about more often than it is. And that's a different kind of message than the one that Sharon Huddleston presents. Now, these people are campaigners. I understand that completely. And that will resonate with some people. It didn't particularly resonate with me. So behaviour is just a really perfect example of how behavioural change works, but sometimes cannot work. I'm not saying there was loads of good stuff that Rebecca Morris spoke about, but her delivery was the one thing that stood out for me. It was very matter of fact. This is the way things are. This cannot go on, which is kind of like a Vision Zero kind of message as well, isn't it? In Project Edward. So yeah, I thought it was important to kind of differentiate between the two styles of message and how they will affect people in different ways.
No, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because it was a conscious thing that I wanted to get the variety in there. I wanted the personal, I wanted the academic, I wanted the professional, I wanted the road safety campaign. Tell us how we can campaign. You know, I wanted this mixed sort of bag in there. And you mentioned the anger there. There was I don't know if anyone caught this. I don't think it came across quite as well on the audio as it did on the actual video, but you mentioned Lucy Straker. There was a point where I asked her, I was talking almost from the instructor perspective of, we need you guys to back us up with some of this stuff about the idea of more lessons. And she snapped a little bit, not like in an unpleasant way. I don't know, but there was an anger there. It's all there. Everything we do is there saying, do more hours, practice this. It's not always saying, do more hours with your driving instructor, because this was the other interesting thing from that episode in particular. They can't aim messages towards driving instructors. They need to aim the generic message to everyone to reach as many people as they can.
Yeah.
And she got quite passionate about that. And I specifically went and looked afterwards. I'm like, she's right. It's all there. From road peace, from brake, from road safety, it's all there. We just have to look for it because they can't direct it all to us. And I found that really, really interesting. But I do think there's that really good for it, simmering anger from some of these people. And that does make for a really interesting contrast. So I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, I want to ask you, what are the others? Are there any others stand out for you? Because, and you know what, I'm interrupting myself because before we get in, I want to give another little shout out to Sharon because I did see Sharon at the Road Piece event and Rebecca Morris. So I'm going to mention this now because they both, well, Sharon in particular came and gave me a big hug and were absolutely a pleasure to talk to. And they both thanked me and driving instructors for walking and for donating and for sharing all the road piece stuff over this last week. So yeah, if you have shared or donated or walked or anything for the road piece in the last week or done anything at all for them recently, they both express their gratitude towards you. So probably the ideal time for me to mention that now. But yeah, what else stood out for you? Any other episodes that stood out for you, Stuart?
So I do feel the need just to kind of talk a little bit more about Rebecca Morris. I feel like I gave her a bit of a hard time there. That wasn't the intention. Her episode was excellent because it touched on many things that are specifically of interest to me around why society in general doesn't take road safety deaths and PSI seriously. And it's that optimism bias. It won't happen to us. So Rebecca talked very eloquently about that. It won't happen to us. And how do we address that? So, I mean, you'll know that I believe that that's a message that we have to get across to driving instructors. I think it should be part of our basic training that all PDIs go through. That yes, people will come to you to learn to drive. They'll go and pass their test, and then once they pass their test, they have that attitude. I mean, I say we as well because I did when I was younger. That's it. We passed the test. I can drive now. And we all have that bias that if you ask us to scale ourselves on a scale of 0 to 100, how good a driver are we? The vast majority will put ourselves as over average, which just doesn't work. So these kind of things are interesting to me. I think that how we go about explaining this stuff to young drivers is a challenge. There's a book by that you can get on TSO, the stationery office, which is the DVSA's kind of publisher. Do the highway codes and essential skills and all that kind of stuff, called Better Driving by Lisa Dawn. I think that's a great book. And I wasn't going to mention this, but I may as well since we're on it. I was on a call yesterday with TSO, Safe Driving for Life, through the NGC, and DVSA were on it, and Peter Harvey from the MSA. Carly wasn't there, but there were some other people, and they have these calls quarterly, and they ask us about what they can do, what gaps do they have in their offerings on the kind of website of Safe Driving for Life. And I made the point that Better Driving by Lisa Dawn, which is being revised and reissued this summer, incidentally, and it's going to have an app that goes with it and all that kind of stuff, sounds really good. That should be basic training for PDIs. Everyone has to know about our limitations in terms of the fact that we're human beings. We all have to know about the fact that we have inbuilt biases about our ability. I can't remember the phrase that Rebecca Morris used, but I call it superiority bias, that we are better than everyone else and that we are more skillful and that our reactions are faster. So that if we are involved in a little bit of trouble on the roads, we have the ability to get out of that. Which means that we're more likely to glance at our phone, do a text message, reach into the back seat to grab that bag of crisps or something, eat the bag of crisps while we're driving. So that was useful information that Rebecca Morris was passing over there. And we would all do well as a driving instructor. And obviously I'm biased here because we teach this on Bright Coaching. We need to know that. We need to understand that stuff. And then be able to pass that stuff on to our clients and the parents of our clients. It's all very well having resources, and we're going to talk about this later as well, but we need to understand these resources as well. Not to the level of Gemma Briggs, but we need to know the basics. We need to know the fundamentals, that they are an issue and that they exist and that they have an impact, rather than the kind of pun on impact. But so I enjoyed that bit.
I mean, the thing you'll get from it today is anytime you mention an episode, I'll go, oh yeah, I love that one, because I did. But I think the thing I want to touch on, you kind of mentioned there about the stuff that we should be talking with our students. As much as you spoke about an optimism bias, I look at the Facebook comment syndrome, which is if I put a post up today and whatever it is, expressing an opinion, and it gets 20 positive comments and one negative, I remember the negative. That'll stick with me for days, and most people do. And I think the same applies to us as instructors. So when we have our students, most of them will be absolutely fine. We're having these conversations and they'll be asking us questions and they'll happily sit through an honest truth video, or they'll happily sit through longer videos sometimes. And, shall we get out of the car and give you a rest for a second? Shall we do, whatever it is that we're doing? I would say 9 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10 would be more than happy doing that. But we'll always get the one that doesn't. There'll always be someone. The same with parents. We'll always get the parents that are, well, I just want them to pass, because that means they can drive and then they can take me to a pub on a Friday. We'll always get those parents, but they're the ones that stand out in the same way that negative Facebook comment stands out. We'll forget all the good ones. And I think it's important for us as instructors that we look at the big picture and go, right, okay, so maybe I can have this stuff with 80% of my students. Maybe with 20%, I have to tone that down a bit. But if we're looking at some kind of scale of, they come in with an attitude that's 3 out of 10, they might leave with an attitude of 6 out of 10. And that might be the thing that stops them killing someone. You may never get them where you want them, because you can't with everyone, but you may get them further down the line. Is that something you'd agree with?
I would agree with it. And it actually reminds me again about Sharon Huddleston, though. We talk about parents who only want their kids to pass the test. I get it. But if we're able to, and this is something I've not figured out myself yet, but I'm working on it, that how do we train driving instructors to deal with these kinds of situations? How do we prepare driving instructors for those difficult conversations with difficult parents? It's very easy for me to sit here and say, if you get a call from a parent who says, I can afford 30 hours of lessons and I want my kid to pass pass their test in 30 hours. Oh yeah, okay, I'll do my best with that. But XYZ, graduated license, Elizabeth Box, 120 hours, all that kind of stuff. And here's some resources on road safety stats. And the parent says, oh, I'm not really interested in all that kind of stuff. I just want my kid to pass the test. We'll deal with all the other stuff later. How can we train instructors to then go back and say, well, listen, that's all well and good, but please just read this one resource, this one half-page PDF that says, that's from the mother of a bereaved parent, that says, this is the stuff that she wishes that she had known before she let her daughter get in a car with her inexperienced friend who'd just passed her test or whatever. If we can just do something like that in some way and somehow, and I don't know how we do it. I understand your argument that we can't get everyone, and should we be happy with 60%? We should still do something, some little kind of. I'm just gonna leave this here. I'm just gonna leave this here because you might not thank me now, but you might thank me in 10 years' time if it's something on mobile phone use. But I think the point's more relevant to driving instructors, which we've spoken about many times, and many of your guests have as well, very eloquently, that we're not going to get 40,000 driving instructors. But this is for the people who believe in the work that you have put across so well in the series. We have to do what we can. We have to keep going, because if we just get one more driving instructor, that's fine. That's one less. If we can get a couple of PDIs, I think that's more important. Not to diss the ADIs, but I think if we get the PDIs, that is far more important, because they're the guys that are going to be doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, potentially.
I agree wholeheartedly. And the kind of the two words that you said there are something I think people there may say a lot more throughout the rest of the year, which is do something. We can't take everyone from a 0 to a 10, but we can take them towards it. And as regards to what we do with PDIs and ADIs, I think that you did something recently, and feel free to plug this as well. The Instagram channel you've started around health, and you did something on Instagram talking about you had a bad week. And we had a little bit of chat about that and spoke, we need to do more of this. And it's something that I've done in the past as well. It's making it prominent, making it common, making it normal, making it natural that when you go on Facebook, not everyone is talking about how awesome everything is. Sorry, everyone is talking about how awesome everything is, but in reality, that's just the sheen. You know, the Facebook group that I run, the Instructor Podcast, I've started the Fail Friday over there, where just to tell, annoyingly, that's more popular than the Success Saturday, you know, but whatever. But I think that's how we do it. In the same way that with the public, we need to start talking more publicly on our social media, on our podcasts, on our YouTube channels, whatever content we're creating as instructors, websites, you know, we need to be talking about the stats, about the dangers, about Vision Zero, about this stuff. We need to do it for instructors as well. We need to do exactly what you just said and talk about, okay, well, this person isn't going to go and watch these 7 30-minute videos, but maybe I can send them this 10-minute one, or maybe I can send them this 5-minute one. Here's a quick example for you. The episode with Gemma Briggs that I did, that was over an hour long, that went out to instructors. I made a condensed version of that. I think it was about 15 minutes and put it in the feed of my 5-minute theory. And that's got like, I barely promoted it. I shouldn't be honest, I haven't. But it's got like 2,000 downloads or something in a couple of months it's been out. And that's going to be by 99% learners, you know, and we need to get that message across. And look, this will annoy some people, I'm going to say now, because I've said it before, and I will keep saying it. And if someone wants to, refer to people as a driving instructor police, they're more than welcome. But that's the content that we want to be putting out there, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, whatever, not the content that says, I can use my phone really well while I'm driving. I'm a driving instructor. I can use my phone really well, but it's just the few that have let us down that mean I can't now. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to put that across to PDIs and ADIs as well, that it's okay to talk about this stuff, okay to come and say, I've got a student who doesn't want to know this stuff, how can I help them? And then there's other people that can help.
Yeah. No, you're bang on. You're bang on. That's really interesting that you shortened that clip with Gemma Briggs, because Gemma Briggs one was really important. I thought maybe we can go on and talk about that one now. I actually listened back to it again this morning, just to get some thoughts kind of clarified in my head. Yeah, I thought it was really useful. Did you say you cut that down to like a 5-minute episode?
I can't remember the exact length. It's like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, I didn't see that. So yeah, that's something that I would share on my driving school kind of feeds. Because if learners are listening to that, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, Gemma Briggs and hands-free versus what's the opposite of hands-free?
Handheld.
Handheld, yeah, thanks. I need another call. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Part of the reason I enjoyed it, I guess similar to the stuff with Rebecca Morris about cognitive bias, I'm really interested in that kind of human limitations kind of aspect, and our inability to multitask and this kind of thing. And Gemma was really good. She got her points across really well, really good at explaining things for non-psychologists. She's got that kind of knack that Liz Box has and Lisa Dawn have for kind of communicating with driving instructors around that. I've got a real I'll put my hand up, I've got a real crossover of interest with that episode, because and this chimes in with the Brighter ADI's Instagram channel about, overall health for ADIs and self-development, productivity and all that kind of stuff. Because I've grown to hate my mobile phone. And part of the reason I've grown to hate my mobile phone is because, as most people will know, I kind of stepped back from in-car training last year to work full-time on Bright Coaching and get that qualification written. And I really struggled at some points to sit in front of my laptop and actually type up content and, proof it and get it sorted and send emails and create webinars for the course and all that kind of stuff. It was a real struggle for me. And I realized that one of my issues is just attention, keeping my focus for a long period of time. So the stuff around how a smartphone steals your attention and has a definite effect on your cognitive abilities was just, I eat that stuff up. I eat that stuff up. She was talking about social norms, the fact that the current generation, I think you brought it up actually in the episode to say that you were of the generation, as was I, that we didn't grow up with mobile phones. They came into our life after a certain point. For a lot of us, that's after we passed our driving test. I was in my 20s before I had a mobile phone. I remember my girlfriend at the time getting a mobile phone, saying, "Why don't you get one?" I was saying, "I don't need a mobile phone. I've got a pager. being really kind of sad about things like that. And the generation today, I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and she's already asking for a phone. And, and we're saying, you don't need a phone, but you're on your phone all day. Yeah, that's different. I'm an adult, I can handle it. And it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for not just for driving. It's a real challenge in schools. There's talk about going on about some schools are banning mobile phones already. There are whole states in America which have laws which ban mobile phones in schools. I was looking at some research. I looked this up in case anyone's interested. This is a paper I looked up for Bright Coaching. There's a paper that is titled, literally, "The mere presence of a smartphone reduces attentional performance." And if the fact that's like a peer-reviewed paper, and it talks about the fact that they took like 18 to 25-year-olds, so like a real target market for us, and they put them through kind of different cognitive tests based on attention and focus, and how just the presence of a smartphone in their pocket or in their room, it was proven that it had an effect on their ability to maintain focus and attention. So yeah, we need to do some more on that as well.
I'm going to give my personal example because I've experienced this quite a bit recently, in a very, very different context, but I think it's relevant and highlights it. I've been on quite a few dates over the past few months, and seeing how people use their phone in like a dating situation, especially on a first or second date where you don't even know the person, is fascinating. Also annoying, because my phone is in my pocket. Occasionally, if it's annoying me, it'll be on table face down, right? But anyone that I've had a meal with or whatever, they just pick their phone up and start and reply. And it's not considered rude and it's not considered distracting, but it is distracting. The phone has distracted them from our conversation. Maybe this says more about my conversation than it does about the phone. I don't know. I hope not. But from my perspective, it's like, it's rude. Even if the phone is on the table not being used, I know I said I might do that occasionally, but if it's hurting my leg or something, but it's that distraction that we're talking about, when it is a distraction because it lights up or it grabs your attention. And I think the thing that Gemma Briggs did really well, or explained better than I probably can now as well, was the difference between hands-free and having someone in the car. Because I can remember it was my nephew that raised a point when I spoke to him about it, and I struggled to give him the best answer. I gave him a reasonable answer, but the way Gemma explained that was awesome. And this is the good thing, that we get these people on that have spent, in Gemma's case, over a decade in this field. She knows this stuff inside and out. So when people comment on that post that I put up about this episode saying, well, hands-free and R2s, I'd do it all the time. And I put the poll up, do you use your hands-free while you're driving? And like most people said, sometimes, I remember correctly, it was like 80% said sometimes, and this is driving instructors, because we think it's okay and it's legal, and that's why it's done. And I found that the response to that episode fascinating as well. The number of people that were saying that. But the other thing, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this potentially, was the number of instructors that, as a result of the episode and the poll, or the poll, came and said, well, I did, but I think I need to stop. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, so I was one of the people who admitted to using my mobile phone on hands-free. I'm a kind of strange. I'm probably a strange case though, because as I said, I don't like talking on the phone. If somebody wants to talk to me, I'd rather do a Zoom call. To be honest, I'm not very good on the phone. I don't talk very much. If it's a call, it's a quick call, and my wife knows that there's no point in phoning me unless it's something urgent. But that's the reason I have my phone on, in case something urgent happens when I'm driving, and it's like, my wife's not going to make pickup for school or something like that. What do I think about driving instructors doing? Do you know? I think it's you've got to be careful of the danger of kind of being judgmental about it. A point that is quite often missed, I find, is that a lot of driving instructors talk about the dangers of people who work in fleets, company car drivers, white van drivers. And we sometimes miss the connection that, driving instructors drive for work every day. And we're driving between lessons, and if we drive like maybe 3 miles to get to a client, I don't know, a bit longer than that, maybe 5 miles to get to a client on the outside of town, and we get there and we realise that we've missed a call to say that that person's not going to make it because they've been held up at work. Do you know, I get that that can be annoying. That can be annoying. And the same as it would be for a white van driver who's on the way to a job and that kind of thing. So I think there are challenges there. Understanding is different. Do you know, understanding. This is similar to go back to Sharon Huddleston again. How many people in society are aware of the fact that the risks of hands-free driving are exactly the same as handheld? I would put my life on it that there are less than 10% of the population know that. My family didn't know it. I was talking to them recently about my niece was learning to drive and they hadn't been told that. The really interesting stuff from Gemma about something I didn't know, just to go back to saying the conversation you had with your nephew, how do we explain it to people? What's the difference between us and people in the car? It makes complete sense, because if I'm in the car with my wife and my wife is driving, doesn't happen very often, because if your partner's a driving instructor, you hate driving. That's just the way it is. But if that is the case, I know that when my wife is approaching a busy roundabout, I know to shut up. And yet as passengers, if your passengers are drivers, we generally kind of do that. We can see what's happening. And that was a really eloquent way, I thought, of describing the difference. It's just the visual information that the passenger has access to compared to the person on the other end of the phone. They don't. So, yeah.
This is normally the part of the show where I plug the IPP membership. However, I'm not going to do that today because we are currently in May and I am walking 5 kilometers a day raising money for Break the Road Safety Charity. So, whilst you are still more than welcome to sign up for the IPP membership, and I would actively encourage it, if you could donate anything to the Break cause, I would be ridiculously grateful. You can find a link for this in the show notes for this episode, or go and find me on social media. Facebook is the best place. Just find the Instructor Podcast and you'll find my regular updates on there. I'm sharing videos almost every day, so you'll be able to find links over there. But even if you just donated a $5, I would be ridiculously grateful. So if you've donated already, thank you. If you're going to donate, thank you. If you're not in a place to, feel free to give it a share. But for now, let's get stuck back into this episode.
I agree. I think that I didn't know this stuff until I saw her presentation at the ICE Live event last year.
Yep.
And it's probably not a presentation I would have chose to have gone to see, but I'm so glad it was there. And it sparked my interest. And again, that's why I think it's important to get it out. And I think that I talk a lot about choices. So you need the information to be able to make a choice. So if you're, take driving instructor out of it for a second, if you're a driver or driving and you're getting a call and you know this is going to distract me, you then have a choice. Am I willing to take that risk? Am I willing to impair my driving by using hands-free or not? And it's legal, so technically you're not doing all wrong. And again, this isn't me judging anyone, but I think if you know that information, you get to make that choice. I'm quite lucky because I'm a bit like you in I don't want to talk to anyone when I'm driving. I enjoy driving. I don't want to be spoiled by people. I just want to drive. So yeah. I'm not answering my phone at all, but that's nothing to do with distracted driving. It's because I don't want to talk to people.
Yeah.
I get away with it.
I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm trying to listen to the Instructor podcast. Do you know what it sounds?
Here you go.
I mean, that just made me think of something else, though. I experimented for a while with, I think it was like a Google setting on my phone, an Android setting, and your phone can automatically detect when you're driving, and it'll automatically cut your kind of internet, and it will cut all your notifications and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of annoyed me because it meant that I couldn't listen to a podcast. And maybe that's just more to do with the tech in my car. I drive a very old car now. But yeah, it's all very well saying to people, let's turn your mobile phones off when you're driving. Let's stick it in the glove compartment. In reality, how many people are going to do that? I don't know. Where I have hope around these kind of things is the fact that, ironically, perhaps, the generation who we are teaching to drive have grown up with phones. It's a social norm. what my hope is that they will come to the realization far quicker than we did about how annoying phones can be and how distracting they can be. And that people will start to, I think, there's you hear it sometimes referred to as like a digital backlash, and people just kind of coming offline, and disassociating from the web and all that kind of stuff to kind of focus on things. So it should hopefully become easier to link the negative consequences on driving with other things like the negative consequences of being able to do your job properly, or studying for exams and all that kind of stuff. That's my hope, and I hope I'm not being naive about that. But I think there's a general theme around young people that I spoke about this at the conference. Young people are rubbish. All this kind of thing. Is that we've got to wait till they grow up and all the brain stuff starts to kick in. It's not that way at all. Young people are not stupid. They know the technology now better than we do. I'm hopeful that they will come to understand the downsides of technology far quicker than we did.
They're not stupid. They're addicted.
Yes.
That's it. And I used the example recently actually of Michael Schumacher, of when he was Formula One racing. He was the biggest campaigner to bring in the more driver safety. Bringing new rules and new restrictions to cars. But until those restrictions were in place, he was going to drive up to the current limits, because otherwise he wouldn't win. And that's kind of what I think the youth, if you like, for today. I forget the data, but there was the number. But there was a survey recently that said it was something like 75% of people under 16 wish that social media was banned for them, because it's there, so they'll use it. But if it was banned, they wouldn't be able to. And I thought that's quite startling. But I think the last thing I'll say on this on a slightly lighter note, but I think it's a really good example. Not my favorite, one of my favorite students a minute gets in cars. First thing she does, connects her phone to in-car radio, puts it on, I think it's airplane mode, so it still connects, but you can't get any calls or whatever. Connects it through, puts a playlist on my thing, turns it down because she knows I can't hear very well. And how good is that? She's not going to receive calls, but she connected to the car, and now she can listen to her music that I can't hear, by the way, because I'm not deaf. She can hear it, but I can't. That's great. That's what we want them doing. That's what we almost want them using the phones for. And I've never said to her, make sure you can't get a call. She sets that up to begin with. And that's where we want them.
I think that's really good. You've just reminded me, I had this thought, just really quickly. If you, there's really subtle things that you can do as a driving instructor to form these good habits. Every driving instructor in the country, in between lessons, is checking their phone. I don't care who you are. If you're a driving instructor, you're checking your phone. And I don't care what you're doing. You're checking for work, juggling clients around, looking up recipes on Instagram, whatever you're doing, checking out Bright Coaching to see that, whatever you're doing. So why not, when your pupil gets into the car, just make it a thing together, right? Okay, phone, flight mode, whatever. Both of you at the same time, both throw your phones in the back seat. Just make it a ritual with your learner drivers. That's just a really simple way, I think.
Yes, and I'm going to advocate that in between lessons, use those opportunities to sign up to the Bright Coaching newsletter and go and follow the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel. There you go. What more could you want? But I'm going to chuck in one more thing. Just between lessons, this is why I have longer chunks of time between lessons. It's so that I can check my phone, but then I can also have a break. Yeah. And not everyone needs the length of time I have. I appreciate that, but maybe consider putting an extra 15 minutes in there just so that you're not rushing about and you can chill a little bit. But maybe that's a conversation for another day, because I know that you were also keen to talk a little bit around the episode we Project Edward and James Luckhurst in particular.
Yes, Terence, I am keen to talk about that. One thing in particular, when he gave the examples of Kate and John. So the talk that I gave at the conference last week or a couple of weeks ago, depending on this episode, because depending when you listen to this, I suppose I spoke at the Intelligent Instructor Conference in at Yarnfield Park about values and the importance of addressing values in young people and society in general. So I'm assuming that everyone that's listening to this has maybe heard the episodes that we're talking about. So James spoke about when he was working as was he a police officer? Was he, or
yeah.
He was a police officer.
Traffic officer, yeah.
Traffic officer, yeah. So pulling over a young driver who'd not long passed her driving test and talking to her about the fact that she'd been speeding and all that kind of stuff. And then he pulled over John, I think it was, who was driving for work on a Saturday. So the thing that I took from that story was the important role that driving instructors play in making the point that driving is not a solitary activity. One of your other guests talked about this. I can't remember who it was. Driving is something that we do as part of a community. We interact with other people. We interact with other road users. We interact with people like us every day on the roads. We interact with people like our parents every day on the roads, like our grandparents, very importantly, every day on the roads. And we interact every day with other people driving for work. And I sometimes think that we are not paying as much attention to the challenges that these kind of things bring, or the lessons to learn as we possibly can. So for someone like John, who James was talking about, that's a really good example of someone who is, I'm trying not to make this kind of judgmental, but it's very kind of typical self-centered driving, and probably rightly so. He's had to go to work on a Saturday. He's got all these stresses. He's trying to get finished early. All the stuff that fleet trainers will be more than familiar with. But then that has an impact on the community. That has an impact on the people that you're interacting with. And we're not very good. It's not that information is not catered for in the learning to drive syllabus as well as it could be. And that I had some really strong thoughts about that in terms of values, which again is part of the kind of bright coaching syllabus. Not driving instructors identifying their values, and how we can work with young drivers to help them identify their values. Because, to kind of paraphrase part of my talk, young people are more likely to respond to behavioural change interventions that resonate with their values, whatever those values are: community, environment, friends and family, and these kind of things. So I think there's a good opportunity to improve this side of things. And again, it's a slow burn. It's a slow burn, Terry, as a lot of this stuff is. But the reactions of Kate as well, who was just genuinely, how would you describe Kate's reaction? Surprised that, that it was a big deal, I guess you could maybe say. But then if we have a conversation with Kate about her responsibilities as the designated driver, and she's responsible for the safety of her passengers, will that make a difference? I think it can. I think this kind of stuff is the positive messaging that people like Elizabeth Box talk about. This is why I build it into our training. It's the exact opposite of consequence-focused messaging. It's about being better, creating better communities, creating safer roads. There has to be some value in that.
I think the example you gave there with John was similar. It ties in nicely, I should say, with what Ian Edwards spoke about, which was what does an amber light mean? Stop. What does an amber light mean if you're running late for a meeting?
Yeah.
Get through before it changes. Yeah.
Guilty, incidentally. Yeah.
And that made me think. And that was an interesting one. And again, that's how we can bring it into our learners. But I want to ask you a very specific question around this episode. I'm putting you on the spot slightly with this. I appreciate that. But, it's all fun and games. How much responsibility should ADIs take for their students post-test?
So, at the risk of overplugging Bright Coaching, which obviously has happened a lot in this series, I believe in it strongly enough that I've built it into our professional diploma. And the reason I've done that is something I learned from Ian Edwards, that we only know that behavioural change works if we follow it up. And if we have a follow-up process in the training, it's more likely to have long-lasting effect. And Elizabeth Box has a similar kind of idea around drive fit. So the intervention with drive fit in pre-teens, pre-young drivers. The the follow-up process of the workshop after they have seen the video. And if you're listening to this and you don't know about DriveFit, get onto YouTube or Road Safety GB website, download or get the link to the DriveFit video and just send it to all of your learners or the learners' parents. Have it on your website, have it on your socials. Just so important. But that concept of follow-up is something that we do not do. It's never been done. So obviously, if something's never been done, that appeals to me. I want to do it. So it's built in there. And what we're encouraging candidates on the Bright Coaching course to do is to go through a whole series of interventions, whole series of coaching models, behavioural change stuff around driver psychology, and then try and do their best to follow up with people after their test. Now, that's a huge ask. That's a huge ask. And that involves getting driving instructors to take responsibility for that. But my hope would be 20 years from now that is normal. That's the norm. I don't know how we do it. All I can do at the moment is give driving instructors a vehicle and the kind of infrastructure, I guess, to be able to set that up. But it's a big ask. To answer your question, how much responsibility should we take? There's no expectation for driving instructors to take any responsibility because it's not in our job description. In the same way that it's not actually our responsibility to teach past levels 1 and 2 of the GDE matrix. That's a very cynical answer. But we spoke at the end of the episode that you did with Rebecca Morris about Chris Benstead, a conversation I had with Chris Benstead around everyone gets where they get to at a different stage in our industry. Somebody just passed their part 3. It's unlikely that we're going to get people setting up interviews post-test 3 months down the line with driving instructors. But I think it's important.
Interesting answer. And I'll touch on 2 points. So firstly, how do we do it? I think I kind of said it before. We've just got to keep doing what we're doing. We can't change everyone, but we can influence some people. That's my thing. We can't change everyone. We can influence some people. And you're obviously influencing people with Bright Coaching. You're influencing people with the social media put out. You're influencing people at the expos and with the NJC and this kind of stuff. And there's not everyone going to come over, but some will. And I think it's just, unfortunately, a slow burn. It's a
slow burn. Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. Something I wanted to add to that is, again, this is about behavioural change of ADIs. So you have to give people reasons to do it. So, for example, one of the reasons could be to differentiate yourself from the market of other driving instructors. So why can't, hypothetically speaking, let's have a product on your website, which is an in-depth advanced road safety package of driving lessons. And it's an absolute minimum of 40 hours or 45 hours. So you could have a package that says minimum of 45 hours, brackets, DVSA, recommended. And in your package, you will include a follow-up, lots of other, you could include all the stuff that we're talking about. Information for parents, PDFs, newsletters, all that kind of stuff. And you could also have as part of your package a follow-up Zoom call or a follow-up session that is within that time period when young drivers are more likely to have an accident. I think that would be a product which is appealing to parents. Not all parents, but it will be appealing to the parents who have access to the information that Sharon Huddleston was talking about.
The follow-up, I try not to do this too much, but I'm going to. What I do at CC Drive, and I've recently changed the structure of this, so I do it now, so it's 3, 6, and 12 months. Mm-hmm. They get a text 3, 6, and 12 months after they're passed. And
amazing.
It's, how are you getting on? Anything you want to talk about? Been anywhere fun? It's those kind of questions. And it'll change slightly depending on the student because we have different relationships and whatnot. And it is 3, 6, and 12. I don't want to keep nagging them for the rest of their life, but they also know they can come back. But the other thing I brought in at the start of this year, and I'm not saying that everyone should do this, but I think there should be something around this, is that anyone that passes with TC Driver, if they don't pass because they've had additional lessons or whatever, anyone that finishes with TC Drive, if they have a problem post-test, they come back to me for free training. Now, that free training could be a phone call. It could be sitting in a coffee shop having a chat because they're worried about something, or it could be a lesson. Now, just to clarify for anyone that's panicking now, I'm not saying they get 20 hours free after the test. It's like if there's a genuine problem that they need help with, not I want to do some extra motorway lessons or whatever, it's like a genuine problem, I will provide something for free because I care about that student and I want to have trained them to a high enough standard so that they don't require that, but also so that if something goes wrong, because they have never driven alone before, they have someone to turn to without that fear of guilt or shame as, oh, what would Terry think? I've passed and now I've done this silly thing or whatever. And there's been a few that have taken it up. No one's come for the actual lesson yet, but there's been a few that have got in touch and said, can we have a chat or whatever? And it's been really good. So I'm not saying that every instructor should potentially provide that free service. That's just something I've chosen to do. But I think every instructor should be making students where they can come back if they want to. And I think the other thing I wanted to touch on there, and it's probably the right place to touch on it, is something I've been talking about more over in the premium content recently, which is, do we teach safe driving for life or do we teach aspects of safe driving for life? And the really easy example I use is nighttime driving. Because it's summer now, they don't get dark till 10 o'clock. So anyone that's having lessons now and passes, let's say, before August, September time, isn't going to drive in the dark. So have I therefore taught safe driving for life, or have I taught safe daytime driving for life? How many of us, hand on heart, can say we teach safe driving for life and not aspects of safe driving for life? Because I can't. And I think that's something we really need to think about.
Yeah, I think you're bang on with that observation, and that's a really difficult one because I have a driving school, and I know that the good drivers are making good money at the moment, and one of the side effects of making good money is that you're more able to pick and choose your hours and your days when you work. The first thing that one of the first things that a lot of driving instructors will do when they get busy is they'll cut their hours to 9 to 5. And Monday to Friday. So that I don't know how we overcome that challenge. In terms of safe driving for life, I have always had an issue with the term safe driving for life, not to get on my soapbox here. I think it's a little bit of a cliche. I think it's a DVSA thing that the whole safe driving for life is just a little bit outdated. I would rather that we thought about it or pitched it as safe thinking for life. So if we're not able to get the opportunity to go and teach people nighttime driving, we can still give them knowledge and information around that. We can still give them resources about the stats. We can still give them information that people are getting from the older drivers course through Road Safety GB, and we can give that to parents as well. I hate driving at night. I really dislike it. I don't have to do it very often. So yeah, I completely get it. Other things we can do, though, I think this is on the same page as what you're talking about. There's this whole stigma about having more than one person in your car at the one time. And I think there's value in having two learners in the car at one time. I think there's value in having one learner driver with two mates in the back while you're teaching them. And I've had this kind of thought since the Hermes video. Because one of the exercises they do on the Hermes video is they're in a big car park and they've made it safe, obviously, and they have the driving instructor, they have the learner, and they have two kids in the back who are friends, and the kids have been instructed to distract the person who's driving. So, they're leaning across, they're playing music really loud, they're dancing. If you've not seen it, I encourage you to go and watch it. And I'm not advocating that every driving instructor who listens to this automatically goes driving round the magic roundabout with having a party in their back seat. But why not? If you've got 3 clients who are all learning to drive with you, I think it's a really good experience to say, well, why don't we just spend a bit of time and you two sit in the back and just have a normal conversation, just chat about what you're doing?
Yeah.
Because that in itself is going to distract your learner driver and give them real life safe experience about how it's going to be after they pass the test.
I should probably chip in here and say that I'm not being judgmental when I say this stuff. I'm being kind of matter of fact, and I'm like that about me because I haven't delivered driving lessons in summer at night time, And I think what we need to do as instructors is take a step back and go, what can I do? And that nighttime driving in summer might not be applicable for most instructors for whatever reason. There's some stuff that I wouldn't want to do on lessons because I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. Having people in the back, I don't like that. Do I care enough about that to get over my dislike of that? That's something I have to be introspective about. But I'm going to throw in the example that I've done. I'm going to fall back to the nighttime driving one. And that is, I brought in 2 10 p.m. lessons a month. And they're booked in my diary. This comes in from June for TC Drive. They're booked in my diary. And I'm going to offer them out to students that I think are at the ideal time for it. And then they're not going to be forced upon them. I've mentioned it to a few already, and some of them are quite like the idea of doing a 10 p.m. lesson, which is, like you think of the teenage brain sleeps later and rises later, so they're potentially more suitable to them. But, I know you say you don't like the phrase, but I'm going to stick with it for this example. If we're teaching safe driving for life, well, we kind of need to incorporate more of this stuff. So again, I'm not being judgmental of anyone that isn't doing that because I haven't done that. And there's some stuff that I probably won't do. But I think as instructors that have driving schools, or whether it's a one-man band like me, or whether you've got several, I think it's important to take a step back and look and think, what can I do though? What can I add in? Multi-story car parks, rush hour driving, McDonald's, motorways, extreme rural roads, as I like to call them, nighttime driving, passengers in the back, radio on, whatever it is, what can we add in there? But
maybe that's something that could be built into that package that I was referring to earlier. That road safety package of driving, that you include a 90-minute nighttime lesson. We live in the UK. We have long winter, and not as long as Scandinavia, obviously, but we have a lot of time, a lot of opportunity to do one 90-minute lesson a fortnight or one 90-minute lesson a month isn't going to kill us.
Yeah.
But yes, and especially if you're packaging it up that way and you're guaranteeing something that maybe your competitors are not doing. I think there's value in that.
And I will just chuck this in. Anyone that wants to get an idea of how to do this stuff, go and follow Rob Cooling, Apple Driving School on Facebook. He knocks the crap out of this stuff. What he does is amazing over there. He takes this to not the extreme, probably to where it should be. It's not the extreme to where it should be. But, maybe this is a good opportunity just to mention graduated driving licenses, because one of the things around GDLs is that it would creep into lessons. It would be a mandated number of hours. It would include nighttime driving, that type of stuff. But I know that you had a couple of bits you wanted to mention around graduated driving licenses.
I do, and I hope I'm not controversial with it. Graduated licensing, in terms of what happens in other countries, it saves people lives. Absolutely no doubt. Would it save lives if it was brought in this country? Yes, I have absolutely no doubt. Is it going to happen? No. And Elizabeth Box, I was speaking to Elizabeth Box at the weekend, and she's the first to admit that it's not on the cards. It's going to be very, very difficult to make it happen. So the issue I have with graduated driver licensing is it feels like a little bit of an outsourcing of the issue from the ADI community. Now, I'm not for a second dismissing the value of the episode that you did on GDL, because we need to understand it, we need to know about it. I guess my frustration, and when I say frustration, it's like just a little thing on the side that's kind of prodding me a wee bit, like a prodding the bruise kind of thing, is about there are so many other things that we could and should be doing better. And GDL has the potential to just distract us all from all these other things. That's my thing. You put up, not you, but if anyone puts a post up on any of the Facebook groups or social groups on GDL, you will get loads of interaction. You'll get like 300 comments. It will get political. There'll be people getting blocked left, right, and centre. There'll be sense in there as well. Don't get me wrong. But you stick up a post about what can driving instructors do to impact road safety, as I did on a local Facebook group at the weekend. Somebody posted something. This is a slight tangent. Somebody on the Glasgow ADI group posted something that I've heard Ollie Taylor talk about. What's the number one way to improve road safety? Stick a knife in the middle of the steering wheel. So I've heard Ollie Taylor use that. And he meant it as a kind of a joke. But I like the comment, and I put underneath, yeah, I've heard that said before. Maybe it'd be useful to have a conversation about, what we actually can do that's more realistic to improve road safety. Zero interaction at all on that. Zero interaction compared to what we get on a GDL post. So yeah, I do have I have feelings on the GDL debate, as opposed to, which are different from my beliefs around whether or not GDL would absolutely be useful. In terms of the ADI NGC, we're currently working on almost like a statement or a position on graduated driver licensing, because as a governing committee, we all have we're a volunteer committee. We all are personal individuals. We all have our own opinions. But what I want to do, and Charles, the chair, actually suggested it as well, is reach out to members and just kind of find out what our members' kind of thoughts or feelings are on it as well. And yeah, we're going to do that. I think that's important to have a position on it. There is can't remember the name of the actual campaign or paper that a lot of organisations are signing kind of digitally and joining. The AA signed it recently, but it's a four. There's a message with kind of 4 key points, and one of it is about graduated driver licensing. Do you know the thing I'm talking about?
The Road Safety Manifesto.
Road Safety Manifesto. That's it. Yeah. So as an organisation, the ADI NGC is looking at that, and we kind of need to clarify our own position on GDL before we go ahead and sign it, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's important. It's important to have a conversation. I would, if we're going to be putting pressure on MPs, there are other things that we can put pressure on MPs for, which are more likely, possibly, to be achieved.
Yeah.
And it would make a difference as well.
The Road Safety Manifesto, anyone listening, you can find that in the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel. Whenever I get all these links and stuff, I always chuck them over there. The thing you said about your WhatsApp conversation where you posted that and you got 0 interaction is that goes back to what, in my opinion at least, goes back to what I was saying at the start. What you're doing there is asking to people to think and look at what they're doing, because it will involve them changing what they're doing. And then that requires work and admitting that actually maybe I'm not quite as road safety conscious as I thought I was. And, this has been one of the great things about this episode is there have been people that have messaged me privately, and I don't share these messages. These are my little messages, right? That people that message me and say, thank you for doing this. It's made me think of this. And it's like, this is amazing. But just with the graduated driving licenses, do you know what? I actually agree with everything you've said. And I started off this episode by saying we disagree on quite a lot. I think I've agreed with everything today. But the thing I think I agree with the most is the first thing you said, which is, will it save lives? Yes. So if anyone is in doubt as to whether it should be in, then there's your answer. But I've had students that have come to me, and this is 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and they're like, I've heard about this. What do you know about this? And what they've heard is, right, well, you can't drive anywhere for 2 years, and you're not ever allowed anyone, all this nonsense. And you break it down to them. I've not had anyone yet that's disagreed with it when I've broken down to them what it actually entails. A bit like I said about a mobile phone, they want social media off it, a large proportion. And of course, there'll be some people disagree, of course, but they want the restrictions. It's almost like we can't trust people. If we could trust people, there wouldn't be any 30-mile-an-hour zones, because we would just do the appropriate speed. And you mentioned the government there, and I do think it's relevant mention this, because I asked a few people throughout the show about will GDLs go through and the government stance, and I think Lucy Straker was the most passionate. Even she was a bit reserved, and I appreciate that organisations, they've got to be slightly tactful because they work with these people. And you've said with the NJC, the NJC is it's an organisation, a collective of people. One of the great privileges that I have is just me. I can say what I want and I can set my stance. And my stance aligns with Ian Greenwood, who I've heard speak about this before, but he said it again at the Road Peace event at the weekend. And it's don't even bother with a Conservative Party because they're all in this war against motorist mindset because they're trying to sneak a few voters that are, whatever. But we need to target the Labour Party, which will almost definitely be the incoming party. And I think that anyone pondering this, anyone wondering how we get it across, get to your Labour MP or someone in the Labour Party, I forget her name now, but the Deputy Minister of Transport or, whatever. That's who we need to be contacting because there's a chance there, whereas with the current government, there isn't. So politically, that's my stance, but I think that as instructors, I agree. I think we need to know what it is. But I think that one of the good things with it is that we can see what the problems are. We can see rural roads. We can see nighttime driving. We can see passion in the car. And as we've just spoke about, we can bring that into our lessons. It's stealing Chris Bence's phrase, minimum standards. We can raise them.
Yeah.
They'll let other people deal with the minimum shit. We'll go and do this awesome shit. We don't have to do ready to pass. We can do ready to drive, whatever we want to do. But yeah, I feel like I've been on my soapbox a little bit there.
So, I mean, I guess one of the other things I would think about GDL is, and I don't speak for the NGC, but if I'm on the governing committee meeting and I'm asked for my opinion, this is the opinion that I would put across, and that is that it comes back to getting information to PDIs and information to parents about it, as you just said. And the story that I tell, I learned to drive, and I know you might not believe this, Terry, nearly 30 years ago. I passed my driving test, and my best friend, so there was 4 of us kind of hanging around as a group at that time, and the one who passed his test first, we were all in his car, and we crashed. He went straight through a giveaway, and somebody T-boned us from the side. My second friend passed his driving test. So again, I'm just going to repeat it as much as it pains me. This is nearly 30 years ago. And their second friend was called Brian, and Brian's dad said, "You can use the family car. It's there for you." I think it was a big Astra, Vauxhall Astra. Said, and the only rule, I've only got 2 rules: that you pay for the petrol, and those 3 mates of yours are not allowed in the car. And that was Billy Thompson, putting his rules on what was going to happen to keep his son and his Astra safe. And I think if we get more of the information that we're talking about, the Sharon Huddleston stuff, the stuff from Break as well, into the hands of parents, then every parent has the power to set their own kind of rules and ideas around that as well. That's something that I will definitely do when my daughter passes her driving test. It's something that my niece passed her driving test a couple of weeks ago. That's something that my sister-in-law is talking to her about, because she has the information because of me. So yeah.
I mean, going back to what we spoke about at the start, if we knew, that's what the parents were saying of the loss of children. If we knew this probably wouldn't have happened, and a graduated driving license system would make people aware. Forget the enforcement of it for a second. It would make people aware. So if someone who had no idea the dangers of rural roads, for example, or the dangers of having passions in their car, and the kid passes their test, if they knew those dangers, even if law wasn't enforcing GDL, they're less likely to actually allow their kids to do it. And I think that, to me, that's what it comes down to. If we knew, and it's easy for me to say, if I knew I'd forgot to press record, I'd have had a better podcast. That's not saying that's happened, by the way, but it's a lot harder to accept that if someone has died as a result of you not knowing something, which could be made much more prominent. It could be made available when you apply for your driving license. It could be, yes, you have to read and sign this before you do this, but
I guess just to go back to a conversation I had with Liz Box the other day, we were talking about a lot of the stuff we're talking about getting knowledge and information into the hands of parents. Who's to say that if a driving instructor had approached someone like Sharon Huddleston and said, here's all this information, it might have been the way that that person was not willing to not receive that information and engage with it. We as an industry, though, I think we are guilty of having kind of negative vibes whenever parents want to speak to us. So I'm very aware of this from my experience within the Scottish ADI community about, pushy parents, and parents wanting to be involved. We are kind of really kind of negative responses to parents who want to come and sit in the back of driving lessons. Parents who are desperate to be involved, but the driving instructors don't want that. And I'm not saying that everybody should be reaching out and getting parents sitting in the back of cars, but there's a behavioural change aspect required there as well in parents, because even down to really basic things about, your kid's not going to pass their test in 15 hours. It's all behaviour. Everything's behaviour.
Yeah. I used to have that mindset. I've still got it a little bit now. When I get a message from a parent, my idiot thing is, oh God,
Yeah. How many more hours?
Yeah. But I think my mindset is shifting. I think now I'm what, even though I don't like it, because I've still got that lingering, oh God moment, but I want them to message me. I want them to be the one sometimes that reaches out rather than the kids to book lessons, because I've now got a great opportunity to communicate with a person that can feed more regularly that information to the students. So,
yeah.
One other little thing I want to touch on there, because you mentioned Liz Box, who, by the way, gave me the best insult ever at the recent convention, which I'm not going to repeat now, but I said it somewhere. I can go back and listen, but brilliant. But I wanted just to touch on the convention for a minute, because I had a little smile to myself during the convention. So first of all, there were speakers such as yourself and Lynn Barry and Tom Stenson and Ray Seagrave. All of them have been on the podcast, which is great. And I'm kind of used to that now to a degree. But then there was that little section in the middle where there was Ollie Taylor, Ian Edwards, and Dr. Liz Box. And I was just kind of sat there with a little smile like, yeah, these have been on. And look, this isn't meant as a criticism towards anyone, and I feel like it might sound like that, and it's not. But they got the opportunity to deliver a 20-minute presentation. They're coming on here and they're spending an hour plus with me. And it's like, how great is that for our industry that they get to come and do that, and they will happily come again. I mean, look, Liz, Ian, and Ollie Liz asks to come on the show now. I'm her, I won't say go-to, but I'm someone that she drops her messages to when she wants someone to get into the instructor world. Ian's offered to come back on. Ollie Taylor's wants to come on the 5-minute theory podcast to reach learners. So how cool is it that we've got these people that are willing to come and present and do the 20 minutes, but willing to come and talk for hours as well?
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I spoke to Richard Storrs at the conference to say, listen, thank you so much for the opportunity, but you've got this the wrong way around. You can't be giving me 35 minutes to talk about the teenage brain and Liz Box 20 minutes. That's not right. That's the wrong way around. That's the wrong way around. Yeah, we are ridiculously fortunate in the way that academics do make themselves available to us. And I think this has been around for a while. Lisa Dawn was the first that I was aware of to come into the industry. I'm sure there are others, but my experience was with Dr. Lisa Dawn through Driver Metrics and Try Coaching. And that was just light bulb moments all over the place, and really exciting stuff that we had to talk about. And at that point, it was fleet, stress, emotions, and all that kind of stuff. And this was 2011, 2012. And to have Ian and Liz, to have Gemma as well. Gemma was excellent. I would hope that Gemma Briggs is the kind of person that continues this kind of work in our industry. Something I want to do is reach out, or maybe reach out to Liz and ask if there's anyone local at the university. I know that there's departments in Edinburgh University that specialise in behavioural change. On a regional basis, should we have some kind of database where we can have people to come to talk at associations or ADI meetings and all this kind of stuff? Because if they are all as generous with their time, even if they're half as generous with their time as the people that you've mentioned, then that has to be a good thing. Yeah. And sorry, just to big you up, you've done a great job in getting these people onto your podcast, because you're just raising the knowledge level of instructors everywhere, and you're helping to raise their profile as well. So yeah, you deserve great credit for that as well.
I could pretend that it's because I'm charming and handsome, but it's more just because they're willing and helpful. Is there anything else that you want to touch back on from throughout this season? Because we've covered quite a lot there.
We've covered loads. We've definitely covered all my the things that I've taken the most notes of. Ollie Taylor, always great value. Just again, he has that experience that very few people have. Again, same as people at Sharon. That insight into a very personal, raw, emotional experience. Ollie has that from being first on the scene at so many of these occasions when things go wrong. There's something in my head, and I mentioned it at my talk at the conference, that you mentioned, why are we detached from road safety? Why there is that gap? And I think we have this emotional detachment from when things go wrong. I think the way I put it at the conference was that these things happen, and we kind of shrug our shoulders, not literally, obviously, but metaphorically, we shrug our shoulders and we go to the next driving lesson and we go into the next driving test. And it's so important that we have people like Ollie, regardless of the honest truth, which is brilliant. And it's so important that we have people like Sharon bringing these stories in. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It's a little bit like reading history, Terry. And I don't mean to get all kind of highbrow about it, but it's really important that people learn about things like the Holocaust actually happened, because if we don't keep reading about it, people stop talking about it, and we don't see the next horrific thing coming in the world. These are the same things. These people have real life experiences of horrible things happening, and they can tell us what the consequences were. And that's really important. There's something else about Ollie that I'd written down that chimes with some of the stuff we've said. Education can start with the parents. Was something that I really agree with. Going forward, that's something that I'm going to take into to my driving school, and obviously working with Bright. Interested in his phrase, the lost generation of drivers. I know what he means, but I almost think that to call them a lost generation has a little bit of a negative kind of connotation. I like to think of it from the opposite perspective, that we are learning so much more about the brain, and we're learning so much more about all these things that affect driving. If you're going to call the young drivers a lost generation of drivers, you could call us a lost generation of driving instructors, or a lost generation of educators, because it's only now that we have this stuff, and me, you, all those other phenomenal people that you have in your show, we're learning this, we're picking up as we go, and we just need to figure out how to get our points across. So that was really good from Ollie.
Yeah, big fan of Ollie. Although the only thing I really care about from that episode was the phrase that I coined, which is "How bad is your dad?" That's the thing that nothing will top that. But I will just say, actually, on that episode, a little bit of background on that. I had arranged for Ollie to come on, and then I spotted that he'd been on the Mirror Signal podcast beforehand, and they spoke heavily. We spoke heavily with Josh Holleran about the honest truth. And I'd had James Evans on before speaking about the honest truth, and it was like, you don't need to repeat that. Let's talk about this stuff and get all this perspective. And so I'm really pleased in a way that it'd been on Mirror Signal podcast, because it made me steer the conversation in a slightly different direction. So that was interesting. But like you said then about the kind of like the emotional connection, you get that with Ollie, you get that with Sharon Huddleston, and I'm going to say this. I was debating whether to say this, but I will. It goes back to the Road Peace event this weekend. Crystal Owen was there. Now, Crystal Owen created the graduate driving license petition, which people can find in the show notes for this. But Crystal Owen lost her son 6 months ago. And for anyone wondering, if anyone thinks back 6 months, there was a story in the news of a group of lads that went missing, and then they found the upturned car. And one of those children was Crystal Owens. And she spoke at the Road Peace event and struggled to keep it together. It was actually the 6-month anniversary of the day she lost her son. And this is what resonated with me. I've got to keep it together now. This is what resonated with me. it was that 6-month anniversary. Everyone else there had gone through a 6-month anniversary of their child dying. And they were able to support her because they'd been through that. And Sharon Huddleston was able to come onto the show and talk with such eloquence because it happened years ago. So she's obviously not over it. You would never get over a loss of a child, but she's able to talk about it. And seeing someone that isn't quite there yet, and then also realizing that everyone else there had that anniversary, everyone else there had been through that, and they're now gone. That's the kicker. And so if you need that emotional connection, go check out the Sharon Holston episode, check out the Ollie Taylor episode, go check out the memoriam on Rotarie's website. Go and speak to these people because they will speak to you. I don't need to say this, but I feel a bit silly not to be tactful. But go and speak to these people because you can get that emotional connection, and it will give you almost revitalize you a little bit. But
I can't just to finish that. I can't comprehend it. I have a daughter, and something that Sharon said struck me about the kind of aftermath. And she was walking through the supermarket and coming to the bits on the shelves where she would stop to get something for Caitlin. And that made me think of going to the supermarket with my daughter. I go to the supermarket with my daughter. She does cartwheels in the aisles. Do you know? That's something that's just a very real thing. I can't comprehend it. Do you know, if you're fortunate enough to be a parent and you listen to that episode, I think that will resonate. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, yeah. I mean, last comment I'll make on this then is that Caitlin was a passenger in a car.
Yeah.
And if graduated driver lessons were in place, she wouldn't have been. And it's that simple. Well, probably wouldn't have been. Kids do stuff, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
But all right, well, we kind of spoke a lot throughout that episode of what ADIs can do. We kind of touched on a lot of things there, but is there anything else you want to mention? Is there any way that you would steer ADIs as around the road safety sector?
I think one of the messages that's important to get across is we spoke earlier on about Rebecca Morris and Lucy and this kind of belief in what they do. And I also got it from Sophie Lydon. She was talking about keyboard warriors and having a laugh whenever she gets to, she was talking about her mates saying, "Oh, here comes Sophie, get your seatbelts on," and all that kind of stuff. And I think we can all become a little bit self-conscious of what we do for a living, and people thinking that we're all a little bit preachy and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to, if we believe in it, that we don't have to be embarrassed by it. And if we believe in it, we also don't have to take it personally when people don't respond in ways that we would like. So, for example, and I know I'm just using you as an example because I'm on your podcast, you're talking about figures for the show not being maybe quite as high as they previously have been. That's almost irrelevant because you know that you've had an impact. You know that you've got that engagement. And I would hope that it wouldn't. Well, I know that it's not going to stop you talking about this kind of stuff. You've got to keep going with it. And I know that a lot of driving instructors in the country will have. There will be. There are hundreds of arguments that driving instructors can come up with about why they won't introduce anything new to their driving lessons. We don't have time. People only want to pass a driving test. If the parents found out that I was sitting at the side of the road talking for 20 minutes, they'd be furious. I've tried sending the stuff. Nobody reads it. All this feedback about stuff that doesn't work is irrelevant if it works for one family. That's a thread that runs through that entire series that you've created over the past few months. Another recurring theme is it our fault? Which I guess is going back to the James Lockhurst one. What responsibility do we have? It's only our fault if our bar is very, very low. If our personal bar about our job is to get people through their driving test and nothing else, if our personal bar, our professional bar, is only about knowledge and skills, then I think that is not enough. If you know about this kind of stuff and you understand it, but you actively choose not to do anything with it, that's an issue. That's an issue, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the last sort of 2 points I would make is first, do something. Kind of, I think you alluded to this. We might not be able to do everything, but we can do something. And also keep your eyes and ears peeled, because on the 1st of July, try that again. On the 1st of July, Driving Instructors to Vision Zero podcast launches, and that will be a monthly show on the 1st every month. Similar vein to what this season's been. It'll be getting information from the road safety sector that's relevant to driving instructors, and hopefully providing some inspiration and some motivation there as well. So they're the two things I would say. Keep your eye out for that coming on the 1st of July, and do something. But one of the great things about having you on, Stewart, today, obviously, other than all your wisdom as comments, is the fact that I don't have to promote Bright Coaching, because you can do it for me. So do you want to just take a moment to mention Bright Coaching, or send people where you want to send them?
Yeah, I mean, your listeners will be fed up listening to Bright Coaching by now. So yeah, thank you for all the interaction that your listeners have given to us on social media, signing up for the newsletters. Thank you so much for that. We're about to do module 2 with the first cohort of candidates. The feedback's been really, really good. We are hosting monthly supper clubs with all our candidates. We're getting some people on. You're on next month or the month after? I can't remember. We'd have a chat about that, about what we're going to discuss. We also, one of the things we do with the supper clubs is support for the monthly assignments. So it's like a monthly kind of catch up that we get through that. Cohort 2 is on the 1st of July, kicks off on the 1st of July. And we're looking at plans for the second half of the year and into next year about whether or not we're going to come to different locations, or whether or not we're going to have an online course. And I've not decided either way yet what to do, because I need input from people. So if you're on our mailing list, the last one I sent out was about 10 days ago, and I've asked everyone to say if they're at all interested in doing our professional diploma, just ping me a message to say, is an online course something you would think about? Or if not, you prefer an in-person, drop me a note and tell me where you are, and we can look into the logistics of that. Started a little side project, just something that's important to me because of my kind of health issues, about how can driving instructors be better informed about nutrition, health and well-being. Shout out to Chris at the Chris Benstead and the DITC for ADI Walkback, because this is the kind of stuff that encourages me to, do more. And I think Chris has shown that there is an appetite for that kind of stuff in the community. So just an Instagram channel, nothing else. And you'll find us at Brighter ADIs on Instagram, and hopefully we'll get some good content for the community on that. Yeah.
And you'll be able to find links for all that stuff in the show notes. But yeah, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining me today, Stuart. Thank you for sponsoring it this season. It's been great having you on board. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Cheers.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.